In 1946, as Europe was beginning to recover from the devastation of the Second World War, a new conflict ignited at the crossroads of the continent. This was not merely a domestic struggle, it was the first laboratory of the Cold War, a brutal collision of ideologies, military strategies, and superpower intervention. Today we will conduct a military analysis of this ferocious, but often overlooked conflict, the Greek Civil War. We will explore the context, the critical turning points, and the factors that led to its definitive outcome. To comprehend the conflict that began in 1946, it is necessary to examine the period of 1941 to 1944. During these years, Greece was under the occupation of Axis forces. The primary resistance movement, the National Liberation Front, or EAM, and its military wing, the Greek People's Liberation Army, known as ELAs, emerged as the most formidable guerrilla force in the country. ELAs established control over extensive mountainous regions, effectively creating a state within a state. When the German army withdrew in October 1944, ELA's forces entered Athens. However, they were met by the returning Greek government in exile, which had been operating under British sponsorship. Tensions between the two factions rapidly escalated, culminating in a bloody urban confrontation in Athens in December 1944, an event known as the Decembriana. Under intense British military pressure, a ceasefire was negotiated, and ELAs consented to disarm. Yet the peace was extraordinarily fragile. The right-wing government, sustained by British support, was accused by the left of carrying out a campaign of political repression. The soil of Greece was thus fertile for a new and more decisive conflict. The Civil War officially erupted in March 1946, following an armed attack on a police station. It's an act that symbolized the complete breakdown of the post-war political settlement. Communist partisans, many of them veterans of LES, reorganized into a new fighting force, the Greek Democratic Army, or DSE. This marked the commencement of the first phase of the war, a period of widespread guerrilla warfare that lasted from 1946 to 1947. The DSE's strategy was dictated by the terrain and its available resources. Its commanders skillfully exploited Greece's rugged, mountainous landscape to their advantage, executing classic hit-and-run tactics. The DSE units would ambush small government army convoys, attack isolated gendarmerie posts, and conduct raids on remote villages to disrupt government control and compel the dispersal of enemy forces. Their overarching objective was to prolong the conflict, erode the morale of government troops, and gradually expand their zones of control, particularly in the northern regions adjacent to the borders of Yugoslavia, Albania, and Bulgaria. These neighboring communist states provided crucial initial support, offering the DSE cross-border sanctuaries, logistical bases, and a steady flow of supplies. This external assistance was a vital strategic advantage in the early stages of the war. In contrast, the Greek National Army, or GNA, was initially ill-prepared to counter this insurgency. The force was poorly organized, suffered from low morale, and was plagued by political factionalism. Its response to the DSE's guerrilla campaign was largely passive and defensive. GNA units were often confined to garrison towns and struggled to mount effective operations to dislodge the guerrillas from their mountain strongholds. They were unable to establish permanent control over the countryside or sever the DSE's critical lines of communication. The situation appeared to be a stalemate, with neither side capable of achieving a decisive victory. However, the entire strategic landscape of the war was fundamentally altered in 1947. In March of that year, United States President Harry S. Truman delivered a landmark address to Congress, announcing a new foreign policy doctrine. He declared that the United States would provide political, military, and economic assistance to all democratic nations under threat from external or internal authoritarian forces. The first recipients of this aid were to be Greece and Turkey. The Truman Doctrine drew a clear line in the sand, positioning the United States in direct opposition to the expansion of communist influence. With this declaration, the United States effectively replaced Great Britain as the primary foreign power in Greece, injecting hundreds of millions of dollars, modern weaponry, advanced equipment, and a significant contingent of military advisors into the conflict. The influx of American support revolutionized the capabilities and tactics of the Greek National Army. Under the decisive leadership of General Alexander Papagos, who would later be promoted to field marshal, the army underwent a comprehensive reorganization. A new counterinsurgency strategy, known as the clear and hold doctrine, was implemented. No longer would the GNA engage in fruitless pursuits of elusive guerrilla bands in the mountains. Instead, its forces would systematically clear a designated area of DSE fighters, then immediately consolidate their control by establishing fortified positions, constructing a network of roads for rapid deployment, and organizing local defense militias. This approach was designed to methodically shrink the territory under DSE influence, severing the guerrillas from their sources of recruitment, food, and intelligence. It was a direct assault on the logistical lifeline that sustained the insurgency. A pivotal element in the government's newfound effectiveness was its dominance of the skies. The United States supplied the Royal Hellenic Air Force with a formidable fleet of aircraft, including robust Douglas C-47 Skytrain transport planes and versatile light bombers. This air power gave the GNA a decisive advantage that the DSE could not counter. Government aircraft relentlessly bombed DSE bases and troop concentrations in the mountains, interdicted their supply lines, and conducted aerial reconnaissance. Furthermore, the C-47s enabled the GNA to resupply its own isolated outposts, dropping crucial ammunition, food, and medical supplies by parachute. This logistical air bridge ensured that government garrisons could withstand sieges and maintain operational effectiveness deep within hostile territory. The DSE, lacking any anti-aircraft weaponry or air assets of its own, was completely exposed and vulnerable to attack from the air. The year 1948 marked a fateful tactical turning point for the Democratic Army of Greece. Under increasing pressure from its international backers to achieve a more definitive victory and establish a provisional government, the DSE's leadership underwent a significant change. Markos Vafiadis, the architect of the DSE's successful guerrilla strategy, was removed from command. The new leadership, heavily influenced by external advisors, made the catastrophic decision to abandon flexible guerrilla warfare in favor of conventional, large-scale positional warfare. This shift compelled the DSE to concentrate its forces, defend fixed positions, and engage the GNA in set-piece battles, a type of warfare for which the GNA was now far better equipped and supplied. This strategic miscalculation would ultimately lead to the DSE's complete destruction. The climax of the war arrived in August 1949 with the Battle of Grammos-Vitsi. The DSE concentrated the bulk of its remaining forces in two heavily fortified mountain ranges, Grammos and Vitsi, located on the border with Albania. This was a final, desperate gamble, representing the largest and most decisive engagement of the entire civil war. The Greek National Army, enjoying overwhelming superiority in artillery and air power, executed a sophisticated operational plan involving encirclement, feints, and relentless coordinated assaults. The GNA's Operation Pyrsos, or Torch, began with a massive artillery bombardment and sustained airstrikes. Government forces first focused their attack on the Vitsi Massif, successfully capturing it and thereby isolating the main DSE force on Mount Grammos. Despite fighting with great tenacity and courage, the DSE units could not withstand the GNA's overwhelming firepower and the tightening blockade. Their supply lines from Albania were completely severed. After suffering catastrophic losses, the shattered remnants of the Democratic Army were forced to retreat across the border into Albania on August 30, 1949. This defeat marked the definitive end of the Greek Civil War. The victory of the government forces was not simply a consequence of superior numbers and weaponry. It was the result of a combination of factors. First, the implementation of a sound counterinsurgency strategy in the form of the clear and hold doctrine. Second, the establishment of complete air supremacy, which crippled DSE logistics and mobility. And third, the fatal strategic error made by the DSE in transitioning from guerrilla tactics to conventional warfare. The external dimension was also absolute. Without the massive infusion of American aid and the direct involvement of American military advisors, the outcome of the conflict could have been vastly different. From a grand strategic perspective, the Greek Civil War was of monumental importance. It ensured that Greece remained within the Western sphere of influence, solidifying American power in the Eastern Mediterranean. It served as the first successful application of the United States policy of containment, demonstrating a willingness to intervene directly to prevent the spread of communism. Conversely, The conflict also highlighted the inherent limitations of external support for an insurgency that lacks a broad diplomatic front and a solid base of popular support. The Greek Civil War stands as a costly military lesson in tactical adaptation, the critical importance of air superiority and logistics, and the profound ways in which a seemingly peripheral proxy war could shape the emerging global order. It left deep and lasting scars on Greek society, but it also remains a classic case study in military academies worldwide on the principles of counter-guerrilla warfare and the violent inception of the Cold War.